to introduce Mike as well and get him kicked off for anyone that didn't see the start of the panel.
Sure. Yeah, Future Thinkers podcast was my favorite podcast, and I learned a lot of great things through it. I think I found it through crypto initially, but it covers all kinds of great topics, and I discovered Game B stuff, everything through the Future Thinkers podcast. And it was actually my first remote work that I did was for Future Thinkers.
Nice.
And yeah, they're still doing great things from the podcast, and the chorus is the community, of course. But the village, the smart village that they're building in the Portal DAO is super exciting, and I wanted to have him here to talk about it.
Awesome.
So we're here.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it's cool to see you working on this stuff too. To kind of work together over the years and see how you've become a player in this space as well. So I appreciate you having me on. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is do a brief intro of why I'm here and what I'm focused on, and what we're trying to achieve with all of these various projects. So we started Future Thinkers, which is a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and consciousness about almost 10 years ago now, after we left Vancouver, Canada, and bought one-way tickets to Southeast Asia and had one recurring website design client. And we wanted to escape Western life and see something else, see something new. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife. And so we started the podcast after a few months of living in Southeast Asia and reading a lot more books and having a little bit more time to think and talk and look at the world from a different lens. And the podcast was really just our kind of breakfast time conversations about stuff going on in the world. And then we started to interview people, and we were early on in the podcasting trend. So we were able to get a bunch of traffic, and it started growing, and it soon kind of took over and became the main focus of what we were doing. We stopped doing website design and content production for other people and just did it fully for ourselves. So we started interviewing bigger and bigger names and kind of tapping into people who were trying to make change in the world. And this meme came about over time called Game B, which kind of coincides with Protopia or Regen or Solarpunk. It's basically this envisioning of a future that could exist if we solved successfully a number of different problems that we have today to do with the environment, to do with social organization, politics, corporations. It's just an envisioning of what life could be. And the lens that we've taken looking at and attempting to invent something in Game B or Solarpunk or whatever is an evolutionary lens, looking at how we've evolved, how we built tribes and communities before the dawn of agriculture, how we organized, and also incorporating the possibilities of transhumanism. I use that term very loosely because I'm not a huge fan of it, but new technologies like AI, blockchains, and distributed governance and distributed communication and production, and law, and trying to figure out how they gel with older systems. And so over time, we announced our intention, which we had since we first met. This plan for the village has been around for more than a couple of decades in the back of our minds. But we announced our intention to start a village, and we put out an NFT to kind of partially crowdfund the purchase of a 400-acre piece of land in British Columbia, Canada. So we returned back to Canada in the midst of COVID, and we bought this land. And the land, there are documentaries like Kiss the Ground that talk about regenerative farming and how if more individuals and families and localized groups of people got together and created permaculture regenerative farms, that would be one of the biggest things we could do to mitigate climate change and absorb carbon from the atmosphere. And this documentary showed this graph of what happens during the seasonal cycles with perennial plants, how they absorb carbon and they just kind of matched up how much carbon gets absorbed from the atmosphere, depending on the bloom cycles of these plants and when they actually come out and start flourishing. So that was super interesting, and we thought like this would be really cool to do on our land, and then to document the process of it and show other people how to do it. So it's been a lot to like describe this whole thing, and this is only really the beginning stage of our project, what I've described so far. It's a lot to kind of like give to people, but we've started to narrow down on what it is, and what we intend to do is scale regenerative villages, to spread the meme of regen, and also give people templates and experiences and potentially even funding to be able to start projects like this. So our intention is to build a DAO and to build this distributed collective decision-making apparatus to allow people to participate in the system. Now, this leads into Portal DAO, which was invented after we had the land. So portaldao.io is sort of the entry of the Web3 metaverse piece into the scaling regenerative villages intention. So with lockdowns and COVID and Canada taking an absolutely insane stance on how to protect from COVID, we realized there are a lot of people that want to visit and be a part of this project, but they can't get through the border. So we wanted to create a very similar experience for people to engage in regenerative projects and to have land-based projects, or at least have the experience of it. So we came up with this idea to build a metaverse of regen villages. Simultaneously, this new technology, Unreal Engine 5, came out just a few months ago for public use. I think they launched it actually in beta about a year ago. So it's had some time for people to play with. And basically it's an engine for building video games, but there's some new technologies with it that make it basically photorealistic. And it's the fact that it's a game designing engine means you can build all types of functionality into it, and you can do real-time rendering. So you can give people real-time experiences, photorealistic, and VR, augmented reality, cross-platform compatibility. So we thought, all right, this technology's out. NFTs are going crazy right now. DAOs are becoming really popular. Like this, there's this convergence of technologies that allow us to attempt to build a village operating system or a simulator or a game. And so that's what the intention is for the coming months. And what we're going to be doing is inviting a lot of people in to collaborate and help us to build the internet's largest library of regenerative 3D assets, so that these assets can be reused inside of Unreal Engine to make games, movies, TV shows, to make regenerative villages the backdrop of sci-fi storytelling. Because that's one thing, like just looking inside of asset libraries, I couldn't find earthships or A-frame cabins very easily. I couldn't find, layouts of permaculture farms. I couldn't find all these assets that related to this world of regeneration. And so I figured if we just put that out there in an open source way, then maybe this will start to enter the culture. Maybe we can memify regen and build it into popular media. So we're going to be hosting a series of contests that I think so far it's going to have two parts to it. One is going to be the asset creation. So let's build, earthships, and I've got a huge list of all the assets that we're going to be crowdsourcing. And then the second stage of the project is to take those assets onto a piece of land inside of Unreal Engine 5 and arrange and have the community kind of build a permaculture eco village and kind of give their interpretation of an ideal place they would like to live in. They design the environments, the weather systems, the bioregion, and then they kit bash all of these other, kit bash meaning taking pieces of other like collections of assets and putting them together to create a village. So I think I've pretty much kind of caught up to where I'm at now. Now I can probably show my screen here. Okay. So these are the three projects we're working on here. I've already introduced the three of them. So the land element is wellsgrayresort.ca. We basically crowdfunded a campsite because we figured campsites are the easiest way to buy into the initial infrastructure you need to build a village and have people come there in temporary like tiny homes or RVs or any kind of like tiny home setup, be able to get electricity, good internet, water, access to food, and then hit the ground running and start building. So we bought a campsite and an RV park and a golf course actually too. It's an existing golf course, which was definitely not our plan initially, but then we realized it's all part of the ecosystem to allow for this project to have enough money to sustain itself. So my family moved on to the project. They're running a lot of the RV park and the golf course, which allows my partner Yuvi and I to focus long-term on the village. So Portal DAO I've mentioned, that's the tech Web3 element. Wellsgray Resort is the land element, and Future Thinkers is the cultural element. And we didn't intend to do it this way. It just kind of happened that like these three projects mapped on to our idea of what regenerative villages would be. Like there's these three important components like culture, tech, land, essentially. So yeah. We've kind of covered these subjects, so I'll skip over. This is a really long slideshow, so I don't want to bog you guys down with that. But one thing we do with Future Thinkers, we've built courses related to resilience and self-sovereignty. We've focused a lot on personal transformation for the last 10 years before we ever started this village project. So we made courses. One of them is called, it's a course in personal evolution. And the first one's about sovereignty, like getting mental clarity. And then the second one is about shadow work. So we talked about this a bit in the panel. My discovery from traveling and from starting hard projects like this that basically have a 99% chance of failing is that if you willingly do hard things, you become stronger and you build up a thicker skin and you build up muscle and you build up your ability to take on more difficult things. And that's kind of, that discovery is something I want to really share with people. So, with what's happening in the world with Ukraine and with collapse of supply chains and collapse of and lockdowns from COVID and all of these crazy things that have happened in the last few years, I see it as an opportunity for us to become more resilient, to test ourselves, and to really do that societal level shift that we need in order to move into regenerative civilization. Because transition, no matter how you look at it, is going to be painful. So if we just expect it's going to be painful, lean in, we might have a lot more opportunity to make change quicker just through that willingness to endure. So we see this as like the need for a return to village life as an opportunity right now with all these things going on. We think smart villages or regen villages will create and promote healthier lifestyles for people. They'll create purpose-driven, future-proof communities and resilient food and energy production, and housing as well. Major problems that we have right now in the world. So like I said, we kind of amazingly discovered that our three projects map on to this like mapping of regenerative villages, our approach to a Game B future. So these are the different areas that we want to focus on. And I'll let you guys just maybe screen capture this, or I'll save the slides for later. All right, I'm gonna skip through this. About the land, if you want to come visit, you can definitely do that. Wellsgrayresort.ca, 400-acre piece of land in the middle of nature. It's a bit difficult to get to because it's in rural Canada, but we welcome any and all people to come join us on this project. All right, so the obstacle, regen villages could be key to solving a lot of problems on the planet, but these projects are hard to start and hard to run, and people want embodied learning opportunities. But due to the size of demand, availability of teachers, difficulty with travel due to the pandemic, can't always happen locally. So building the regenerative metaverse is sort of our answer. And like I said, there are a series of technologies that kind of come together. Let's say DAOs and collaborative tools, allowing people to make large-scale collective decisions, advanced world building with Unreal Engine 5, advancements in NFT and DeFi tech, so using NFTs as access keys or memberships to projects, communities like this, and then grounded AR, VR, 3D education. So these are all pieces that we want to build in. There, Apple might come out in the next year or so with AR glasses. So there's this huge opportunity to build in 3D augmented reality education into a project like this. Let's get through this. So the way the metaverse works now, this is sort of an interesting thing. The way it works now is it will basically, someone will create a grid and they'll divide that grid up into chunks of land and sell those off to people. So ironically, in this like supposedly decentralized setup, you end up creating multiple hyper siloed places that are basically like a hyper capitalistic recreation of what we already have. There's no innovation here except for the fact that you're buying virtual land instead of real land. So our idea is to take a piece of land and give people access to that VR environment in its entirety, a large chunk of land, like a replica even of our land or someone else's land, and then to divide it into dimensions so that you have dimension 1. You might have some consistent things across dimensions like a community center, but then everything else might be totally up to the land steward. And then what you could do is have collaboration across dimensions. So you could say, I like dimension A's approach to permaculture farming, and I like dimension B's approach to housing, and I like dimension C's approach to septic or electrical system. And then you can just incorporate these in almost like a paint by numbers system. Like I paint over here and build that dimension into my dimension. I paint over here and build that dimension. So that's kind of the innovation we're going after with this place-based multidimensional metaverse. And then the AR component's really interesting too. So we want to bridge the gap between real projects and the virtual. So we want to have courses and workshops and events and the ability to like explore this land in VR and have some sort of deep connection to the land. So you should be able to like put your phone up in front of your face or go in VR or play a video game and be able to see all these little icons pop up all over the land and go explore these courses and have experiences and potentially meet up with other people. So the NFT play, we're delaying this, so I won't get super into the NFTs because the market crash has made this a little bit ridiculous to try and launch a project like this right now. So we'll wait. We're not in a rush to get this out there. But the archetypes, I basically taught myself to do 3D and like made 5,000 unique characters that are basically like doorways to the Smart Village metaverse. And so they're based off of the 6 archetypes from, well, there's actually more than 6 archetypes, but they're based off of archetypes from Jungian psychology. And these are deep subjects. I won't get into this in this conversation here, but they're super deep. We've done a whole podcast series about them. They're really useful as a way to investigate other perspectives or other ways to look at the world by embodying certain archetypes. So for example, you find yourself kind of being a slob and your house is a mess and you know you need to go apply for a job or you know you need to do a bunch of things that you're not doing and you'd rather just kind of watch TV and sit on the couch. So the archetype you would want to embody here is the warrior. The warrior is disciplined, regularly does hard things, does things the body or the monkey doesn't want to do. Will willingly go into conflict if it's for the right cause. So I won't get super deep into this, but that's just one example of how you can embody certain archetypes. Lots of utilities coming with this, but I won't get into this because we're not quite ready to launch. And then the living lab. So we want to make our actual local property into a laboratory for people to test different technologies, different approaches to permaculture. That's why we bought such a large piece of land. It's 400 acres. So we want to be able to try out new economies or Web3 and metaverse tech, village simulations, regenerative infrastructure, all kinds of different education formats. We could actually have multiple micro villages on the land that are kind of like self-contained and have different approaches and kind of split test. So I think I've pretty much reached the end of this presentation here. sponsor. If you want to be part of the project, if you want to just come for a visit and like treat it like a campsite, you can do that at wellsgraveresort.ca/booking. If you want to do a work stay program, check out this link, futurethinkers.org/village-work-stay- wow, we need a new link. And then interested in investing, we are opening for investment, and then we are pursuing the NFT allow list in probably 6 months, maybe a little less. And that's it for the presentation. So I kind of was hoping to open this up to questions at the end here, or maybe invite Peter back in to dive into things he's interested in.
Yeah, you're still there, Pete. Yeah. So I really love what you were saying, especially the part about mapping the personality types to cards. It's one of the things that we did in metagame is to incorporate people's alignment and colors, and we mapped them to like Magic the Gathering cards.
Nice, yeah.
So I think having that archetype and like identity helps people understand themselves better and kind of align them with other people that think more like it. Can you talk about how you arrived at the archetypes that you did?
Sure, yeah. Basically, I picked the ones I was most interested in. There's 12 archetypes, and if this succeeds, we'll do the other 6 in the future. But right now, I kind of looked at culturally where we're at, what archetypes I think are the most useful. And warrior, explorer, creator, lover, magician, and king were so obvious to me. The warrior is a really important one. Like I've said a lot in past conversations, doing the hard thing and being disciplined is super useful. And just being on the land now and realizing how much physical work there is, there's no room for, I need to self-actualize when you need food, like there's no room for these like higher conceptual level things when you need to make ends meet. So the warrior is really useful for that. And then there's like personal development and meditation and being in your senses and being patient and being in relationship with others. And that one's heavily embodied in the lover archetype. So the lover is not just about sex or love. It's about being in touch with your senses. And then another one, for example, is the magician. So like I'm heavy in the magician archetype because I explore new knowledge or new avenues of knowledge. I bring that back. I formulate it into something. I make a spell. I make a potion. I make something out of it, a machine. And then I release that into the world and try and help other people to understand it and build upon it. That's basically what the magician's all about. And then an opportunity for me is like a highly introverted person not wanting to I get exhausted in big group settings. The king is super useful for me there because the king will reluctantly take a leadership role and bless the people that he leads. So there's this like reluctant leadership, this desire to defend as a father that comes into play a lot. Like I'm the king in the family because I take the role of protector. When it comes to my son, there's a lot of danger on this environment. He could get eaten by a bear very easily. So yeah, that's where the king comes in. That's something I'm trying to work on, is embodying a leader mentality and not doing it in a way that's becomes a dictatorship or a solo hyper-centralized thing.
Super cool. So one of the other questions I had was about the podcast and kind of outreach and like communication. I think that's like a really important part about everything that we do is like building the network. Can you talk a little bit more about how people can build their network and get a voice for some of the projects that they're doing as well?
I feel this is like a pretty big weak point for us. Like the podcast is really a response to me being too introverted to go out there all the time and like meet people face to face. So I was like, I have these ideas, I have these creative kind of pursuits, or I have these conversations I'd love to be having one-on-one with people. So we just pressed the record button and released it. And that's been the foundation of everything, really. So I'm barely active in social media or Discord or any of that stuff, and I find it really difficult. So I'm kind of the wrong person to ask about that. We need community people.
Yeah, I think that that's an important part, right? Is that a lot of us are focused on building, and we need that support too. So that's so like if we're not strong on it, it's a good opportunity to build networks outward. So I really appreciate you coming in and sharing on the panel. That was a great debate and not really debate, but just sharing and discussion about kind of where tools are going and kind of like how the way to think about um, structure that we're doing. Do you think that you could mention a little bit more about the exact goals and problem that you're solving right now?
Sure. Well, that's the toughest part because there's so many pieces to it. I think villages, regenerative smart villages, whatever you want to call it, it's hard to define what it is. Solarpunk, I think it solves a ton of social problems. It reduces isolation, brings people together around shared meals, helps people to raise children together. So there's a lot of that kind of communal element we're trying to build in that I think is really useful in projects like this. Then there's the environmental aspect where you're trying to self-sustain as much as possible by doing your own farming, producing your own energy. Maker spaces are super important in projects like these. So we've started building a maker space so that we can build the furniture that we need or build any of the stuff that we need using local materials, using fallen trees from the land. And so that's kind of the three elements, right? That's like bringing people together, the cultural element, and then the tech piece is honestly like I just find it fun, like the regenerative part, the Unreal Engine part, the NFTs, all of that. Like I'm an artist. I have a background in music and visual design stuff, so I'm pursuing that primarily because it's fun, and then I can actually build cool and interesting and useful things into it. So I feel like it's just so boring to be like so heavily focused on problems and solutions all the time that I'd rather just like, I don't know, try and make everything intentionally congruent so that if I work on one thing, it builds a bunch of other things at the same time. So I hope to build like into this template of regenerative villages, maker space and an art studio and a media lab and stuff like that, where these pieces come together and allow people to create stuff which attracts more people. Because that's like a lot of these projects will be rural because that's the only way you can afford it. They'll be way out in the boonies somewhere, super far away, really inaccessible, and we'll see that kind of like mycelial network increase out into rural lands. So you need kind of a bigger reason for people to come out. It's not always just like it's not always enough. What most of these eco villages are really offering. So I've been playing a lot with this concept of the central attractor, like, and thinking a lot about where all the places I've traveled to, like what I like the most about them, what attracted me there. And places like Lisbon, Portugal, or Berlin, or Ubud in Bali, or Plovdiv, Bulgaria. They have these like deep cultural roots, this history of art and music and suffering as well, which also informs a lot of that art. So I've thought about that deeply and tried to incorporate those sort of central attractors into our project to give people, I don't know, like a sense of meaning and connection, and a sense of beauty as well. Like it's not enough to just say, "Hey, we're all value aligned here." Like
our stream person will then admit you inside.
So one of the things that you mentioned that is really powerful there, that kind of resonates with the question that I asked you, is about connection, and it's focusing on inward connections rather than only outward connections. So I think, especially today, as we've talked about local impact and driving culture and supporting our local communities, that we don't always kind of look globally. We can use the tools from the global infrastructure, but at the end of the day, we need to definitely make impact on ourselves, and we don't do it alone. We do it in a
Yeah.
place that people can support. So like as you say, like out in the middle of nowhere, you're not looking for outsiders to come in. You're trying to support the community that's already there and empower those networks and grow kind of the roots that are already there.
Yeah. And it's a challenge too, as someone who's been quite globally focused for a lot of years. Like, it's really rewarding. Like I said before, you know, when Peter asked what's the difference between working on something in the land and working in the online world, it's like instant result. Like, you do a thing and you see the result. You know, you mow the lawn or you know, plant some plants or stuff like that, and you actually just see the results right away. So that's really had a much stronger impact on me than I thought it would.
Yeah, we had someone yesterday that was a professional chef, and he had the same impression. It's like when he's cooking, he knows exactly how the structures and the flavors are going to break down, and so even if it's an experimental flavor, like the immediate results are there, right? You make the dish is done. It's not you're going to plan the dish for 6 months, and in a year from now, the team will have the dish ready.
Yeah. There's a reciprocal opening when you're involved in land projects where like agent and arena interact for each other's benefit. That actually is another thing I would hope could spread in this regenerative meme. Like, people have this attitude that people are just like a plague or a virus on on Earth, and I think they just don't know how to be in a reciprocal, widening, or opening relationship, agent and arena, where both benefit each other. And that's sort of like the indigenous land management practices. That's being in touch with your land. That's like the story of the giving tree. I won't get into that, but that's a really interesting story worth doing a Google search for. That's like the golden goose scenario too. Like, you have to feed the goose. You have to nurture the goose. You don't just like kill it to take all of the gold. You know, so there's this, I don't know, this practical realization I've had that I wish I could share with more people, that people can actually be totally in line with nature and be good for nature and still shape nature as well.
Well, great. Thanks so much, Mike. It was amazing having a chance to talk with you and follow up more, hear about the eco villages and everything that you're doing. Keep up the amazing work. And next up, we have a small group of people led by my friend Nelson. Nelson, are you here with us?